Welcome to Back to Basics. I am Gerardo Estava, and today we're going to talk about deploying your code. Have you ever deployed your code nervously? I know I have. Back in the day before the cloud and modern software development practices, I remember the adrenaline rush of manually logging into a server, running my deployment scripts, and just hoping that it works. And I remember many of those going wrong or upsetting our users for a long period of time because we broke the system, and also scrambling trying to roll those changes back. Fortunately, in the cloud, we don't have to deploy with this level of uncertainty, thanks to modern software development practices and services that allow us to automate code deployments. So let's start with an example. The simplest architecture I can think of, a single Amazon EC2 instance running your code. But how can we deploy new code to this instance? Well, I can of course connect manually into the instance and run my deployment scripts. However, by doing this, I'm risking something going wrong with my code or the script and potentially disrupting my users and bring back those hurtful memories of manual rollbacks. Because even if you tested your code in a development server, there's always a chance that the production server is different. This is what's called mutable infrastructure. Perhaps someone logged in, updated, or changed something and forgot to update the development server. So your deployment in one mutable server may behave differently in another mutable server. It happens. So how can we implement control changes so that our running code can be changed in a predictable manner? We can do this with immutable infrastructure. Because with immutable infrastructure, no changes happen in the production server. For example, with two instances, we can have one instance for deployment while the other one keeps serving the traffic. An easy way to ensure availability and performance of multiple instances serving traffic is using autoscaling. One of the beautiful things of autoscaling is that it automates instance creation, for example, by having pre-baked Amazon Machine Images or AMIs. Because these AMIs include the operating system we need and all the software packages needed to run my application. With autoscaling, when an instance fails or we have an increase in traffic, more instances are quickly created based on that pre-baked AMI. So now that we have our application running on our autoscaling group, how do we deploy code into it in a controlled way? Well, to minimize risk of deployment and maybe errors, I'm going to suggest that we use automation. There are many great tools to help with this. For our example, we're going to use AWS CodeDeploy. This is a service that makes it easy to automate code deployments while maintaining your application uptime. CodeDeploy is very easy to use. You need to set it up by installing the agent and configuring your deployment configuration. And then you can start creating deployments, pointing CodeDeploy to your code. That's it. But CodeDeploy also has a couple of mechanisms to help us mitigate deployment risks. For example, configuring a one-at-a-time in-place deployment means that CodeDeploy will deploy the code only to one instance in our autoscaling group, and only after that's deemed successful will it deploy to another one at a time. You can see how this gradual process makes deployment much safer. Another way of mitigating risk of deployment is by deploying to parallel environments. This is sometimes called blue-green deployment. CodeDeploy also allows us to choose blue-green deployments. With this, CodeDeploy provisions a new autoscaling group, let's call it the green environment, by copying the original one that we call the blue environment. Then CodeDeploy will deploy the new application revision onto the green environment, and once the deployment is deemed successful, CodeDeploy can reroute the traffic. CodeDeploy also helps us automate testing to make sure that our deployment actually worked, and automate rollback in case it didn't. This helps us minimize recovery time, but also manual errors. We can achieve this by using CodeDeploy pre-deployment and plus deployment triggers that, for example, allow you to trigger a Lambda function to do functional tests. CodeDeploy can automatically roll back when the deployment fails, or when that Lambda function returns an error, or when a CloudWatch alarm is flagged. So there you have it. Nervous deployments are a thing of the past. If you use immutable infrastructure, perhaps with autoscaling, and you automate your deployments, perhaps with AWS CodeDeploy, you can get a lot of peace of mind when deploying code. See you next time.